and Marty Jannetty, the Rockers, victorious in their matchup. Second part of this region, we had Midnight Express taking on Steve Williams and Ted DiBiase. It was actually the Midnight Express victorious, and they will take on the Rockers next round. Then we had the Bromans taking on Paul London, who you just heard in our promo. We had Paul London and Brian Kendrick. Paul London and Brian Kendrick were victorious as they beat the Bromans. Now we have Kevin's favorite guy, that Canadian guy, and Dean Malenko taking on Rated RKO. Actually, a matchup that I would love to see. If that was ever possible, I would have loved to seen that matchup.
A lot of Canadian people in that match.
A lot of Canadian people in that match. 3 out of 4, 75%? Yeah. It was actually that Canadian guy and Dean Malenko victorious over Rated RKO, and they will take on Paul London and Brian Kendrick next round.
We joined a special guest in the studio.
Kevin's dog.
Little Nani Felice decided to bless us with a present.
She decided to come hang out with us for a little while. She was here pre-show as well. So.
Yeah, she's afraid of the group that's amassing downstairs for Strat. So
she's not a group. She doesn't like the stress of multiple people.
She's only a year old. She's not very social yet.
In the next matchup, we had the NWO Wolfpack, the Red and Black, taking on Harlem Heat, and it was actually the NWO Wolfpack for life.
That's right.
Beating Harlem Heat. Next matchup, we had Jay Lethal and Consequence. Consequence's Creed, I'm sorry. Taking on the Hardy Boys. And it was actually, like I said before, this is my second favorite tag team of all time, the Hardy Boys, and they were victorious. Then in the next region, we had the Dalton Boys taking on Evolution. And it was Evolution, obviously, picking up the victory there. One of the most underrated tag teams in my mind in the early 90s, the Smoking Guns, taking on Dory and Terry Funk, who obviously are straight legends in the business. And it was Dory and Terry Funk, the Funk Brothers, victorious.
Masters of Hardcore, right?
Masters of Hardcore, yeah. They're the originators in my mind.
That was pre-Cactus Jack and...
pre-ECW, really.
ECW,
I mean, yeah.
When ECW grabbed Terry Funk was probably already in his late 30s when ECW was there.
You could ask Terry Funk to do a hardcore match today and he would do it.
Yeah, well, we saw him at JCW that one. He didn't get in the match, but he was heavily involved as a manager.
Manager, enforcer, yeah.
There was some sticks and chairs getting thrown in favor of Tommy Dreamer in that match.
And we have the next matchup, a current tag team, I guess you could say, even though they unfortunately are going to get broken up, the Masters of the WWE Universe taking on Bill and Chuck. And there was the Masters of the WWE Universe victorious.
There was no match made in heaven there.
Unfortunately, we might not see Tyson Kidd for probably 6 months or so with his vertebrae injury.
It's a shame because Cesaro is just getting bounced around because of the fact that it just whatever they make for him just seems to not work, or in this case, an injury.
But maybe now he has the fans behind him now. I mean,
the fans love him. The fans have loved this guy since day one.
It's really unfortunate for Tyson Kidd because he was getting a push of a lifetime, and just something like that, those injuries happen, and it's unfortunate though. We had Johnny Hotbody and Tony Stenson taking on Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper. One of my favorites of all time.
WrestleMania 1.
Yup. And it was Paul Orndorff and Rowdy Piper picking up the victory. And they will take on the Masters of the WWE Universe. Then we had the world's greatest tag team taking on Soul Patrol. And it was Soul Patrol picking up the victory. Then we have Sin Cara and Rey Mysterio, who tagged for all of a month?
Yeah, something like that.
We had to fill in these spots somehow, right? Taking on the Wild Samoans. And obviously it was the Wild Samoans picking up the victory just by sheer size alone.
Yeah, or the fact that they've been tag teams for life.
And then we had the Faces of Fear taking on another favorite of mine, Chris Candido and Lance Storm. And it was actually the Faces of Fear picking up the victory.
Yeah. I think it was just pure power.
Pure power in that one, taking over the technicality of Candido and Lance Storm. Then we had the Rock and Sock Connection taking on Can-Am Connection. And it was The Rock and Mick Foley picking up the victory, and they will take on the Faces of Fear. We had Dick the Bruiser and Crush taking on Jericho, Chris Jericho and the Big Show. And it was Chris Jericho and the Big Show picking up the victory. We had the Dingo Warrior and Sting versus Lex Luger and Sting.
That was like the first round matchup. It was the Mega Powers versus Macho Man and Zeus.
Yep. And it was, well, I'm going to say this right now. Sting did win this match.
Yes, Sting's moving on to the second round, folks.
It was Sting and Lex Luger picking up the victory, and they will take on Jericho in the next round. The Powers of Pain took on the Nasty Boys.
This was a tough one.
It was. I like both of those.
Neither one of them can wrestle worth a damn.
Yeah.
But damn, can they beat the hell out of each other.
They could beat the hell out of each other, and they were very entertaining. And it was the Nasty Boys picking up the victory. We then had the Heartthrobs taking on Randy Savage and Jerry the King Lawler. And it was Kev's favorite, Randy Savage and Jerry Lawler.
The old AWA tag team.
Yup. Then we had the Shield taking on the Big Show and Miz.
This one was
Show Miz.
This one was definitely has to be an upset.
Probably so far from what I've looked through, it's been the biggest upset so far, and it was actually Show Miz beating the Shield.
It's got to be the Big Show influence.
It has to be, but I would still give the edge to the Shield in that matchup. But it was Show Miz over the Shield. And then now it was, next matchup, Tons of Funk taking on Yokozuna and Owen Hart. And I'm pretty sure this was a no-brainer for everybody. It was obviously Yokozuna and Owen Hart.
This sounds like an interesting matchup because now you have the Big Show taking on another monster in Yokozuna, where the Miz is outclassed by Owen Hart. So you think a no-brainer would be the former tag team champions.
Yokozuna and Owen Hart. Absolutely. In my mind, it would be a no-brainer. Next, we had Chavo Guerrero and Hernandez taking on the British Bulldogs. Probably top 5 favorite tag team for me right there, the British Bulldogs. And it was the British Bulldogs picking up the victory. We had Public Enemy taking on the Head Shrinkers. And it was the Head Shrinkers.
Another Samoan team.
Another Samoan team. And it was the Head Shrinkers picking up the victory. And they will take on the British Bulldogs, which will be a great matchup. Then we had Demolition, Axe and Smash taking on the Dudley Boys.
Now, this is hard. I mean, you have the Dudley Boys who have won the tag team titles in WWE, WCW, ECW.
They never won a WCW.
Yes, they did.
They did?
Yep. TNA.
Yeah.
And NWA.
Yep.
So you say, all right, these guys have won every single place they've gone. They've won. They've had a total of 5 tag team titles, major tag team titles, multiple times.
Yep.
Then you got Demolition. Okay, Demolition used to get that rap, oh, they're the wannabe Legion of Doom. I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that at all.
I thought Axe and Smash were great. Former 2-time WWE World Tag Team Champions. Yep. I think the only knock on Demolition was they started their career very late in their age-wise career, so they didn't have the longevity.
Longevity that a lot of other people
I think if you take Demolition and you put them in their prime against the Dudley Boys in their prime, you have an absolute
phenomenal.
You have a battle.
You have a match that can go 40 minutes.
To me, this goes either way. So before anybody says, the Dudleys, they made tag team. They're the hardcore tag team. Axe Smashers want to be LOD and blah, 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 blah. Don't look at it like that. You got to look at these guys in their prime and what they did in their prime. And the Legion, not so much the Legion, the Demolition wrestled during the greatest era of tag team wrestling
ever.
And were the 2-time champions on top of that era of 15 plus tag teams in the WWE at that time that were top rated, and the Dudley Boys weren't even in the picture yet.
Yep. And at that time, whether it was the Dudley Boys, those 3 tag teams. Yep. It was the Dudley Boys, the Hardy Boys, and Edge and Christian.
Right.
And that was
after. You're talking about 2 generations later.
Exactly.
So the Dudley Boys weren't even in the picture yet. Legion of Doom were still in the AWA, NWA.
Yeah.
So, and then they, by the time the Legion of the Axe and Smash of Demolition's career started winding down in WWE, that's when Legion of Doom was part of WCW, when Crockett and all that crap, they dissolved NWA and all that, and WCCW became WCW.
Yep.
So that, and then Paul Heyman was WCW, and then the birth of ECW, and then the Dudleys and blah 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 blah. So before you jump on the Dudley bandwagon, and people obviously know where I'm going with this because by what I'm saying, the result is that Axe and Smash and Demolition won this match, and I feel that Axe and Smash and Demolition, in their prime, were a better tag team than the Dudley Boys, because Dudley Boys were more of a hardcore tag team.
Yep.
They were not a outsmart you kind of tag team. Where Demolition was. Demolition could battle with the best of them, but at the same time, they can outsmart you in the ring. And hence why they, not only were they tag team champions twice, they were tag team champions as a heel and as a face.
And at the same time, you got to look at it this way. Demolition could never have a bad day for the very fact that there was 15 top-level tag teams at that time. The Dudley Boys, I mean, not saying the Dudley Boys ever had a bad match.
We've read a lot of WCW, ECW tag teams in this tournament.
Yeah.
And people are probably snickering, going, "Oh God, I remember them."
Yeah,
exactly.
So the Dudley Boys were the one team out of that really came out and really.
You couldn't sit there and say WCW and ECW in a 10-year span and say, "Wow, I remember there was 15 great tag teams that came into WCW and ECW." No. You're lucky you get 5.
Yep.
Okay, from 1981, I'll say, till 1991. Mm-hmm. You can name easily 15 dominant, unbelievable tag teams that came into WWE.
Yep.
You can probably name 20 good ones, but 15 absolutely dominant.
Yeah.
And Demolition was in that mix, involved in the title reigns during that era, and was on top.
And it's also at the same time where feuds actually meant something. Feuds were built up, so even when they weren't in the tag team title picture, they still had a valuable feud with somebody. So as Kev just said, we had Demolition, Axe and Smash beating the Dudley Boys. And the next matchup in this bracket is going to be the Usos taking on Tony Stenson and Larry Winters. And it was the Usos victorious, and they will take on Demolition in the next round. Which, I mean, in my mind, that's a no-brainer. Nothing against the Usos, but it's a no-brainer in my mind for the next matchup.
Another Samoan Dynasty tag team, but just not the same type of that tag team.
Yep, we have the Beverly Brothers taking on David Flair and Crowbar, and it was the Beverly Brothers victorious.
Could be the only match they ever won.
Yeah, it possibly could be. The next matchup.
See, that was the 16 through 20.
Yep.
The top 15, great. Those Beverly Brothers were the 16 through 20.
16 through 20.
Right.
Good tag team. Yep. We have the new Hart Foundation, not the old, but the new Hart Foundation, taking on Booker T and Goldust. And I actually looked at it real quick and I was like, wait a minute, that can't be right. But then I saw the new in front of the new Hart Foundation. As you can tell, it is Booker T and Goldust victorious, and they will take on the Beverly Brothers. We have the Moondogs taking on Miz and Mizdow, who they ruined that whole thing. They should have had Mizdow come in the Royal Rumble, and it would have been great. Yeah. But it will be Miz and Mizdow advancing the next round. We have Kronos and Saturn taking on the primetime players. I absolutely loved Saturn in his day. In his prime.
I do, and that was like the coolest names of wrestlers back then. It was just
I love Perry Saturn. He was so badass. He's one guy that you just.
But he couldn't wrestle.
He couldn't wrestle, but you just looked at him and you're like, I don't want to mess with that.
Yeah, but you also didn't know if he was looking at you back then.
And it was actually the primetime players victorious, and they will take on Miz and Mizdow in a current era matchup in round 3.
That's right.
You have Professor Tanaka and Mr. Fuji taking on Foreign Legion. And it was Tanaka and Mr. Fuji victorious. This is a very interesting matchup. It is going to be the Wyatt family taking on Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. And it was actually the Wyatt family in what I consider an upset.
A little bit, but you also understand Mr. T was not a wrestler.
Mr. T wasn't a wrestler, but it's Hulk Hogan. It's a Hulk Hogan, so, I mean...
It's like Cena.
Yeah, anything that Cena loses, you have to consider an upset. So it will be the Wyatt family taking on Tanaka and Mr. Fuji. Next, it will be Eminem taking on Rosie and Hurricane. And it will be Rosie and Hurricane advancing to the next round. Amazing matchup right here next. We have the Quebecers taking on the Killer Bees. 2 of those top 15 tag teams that we were just speaking of.
That's right.
And it will be the Quebecers advancing, and you couldn't go wrong in that matchup regardless. Whoever won that matchup deserved it. And it will be the Quebecers taking on Rosie and Hurricane, and once again, we have a matchup where I consider it to be a no-brainer. It will be Kevin Sullivan and the Tasmaniac, obviously Taz, taking on the Rhodes Scholars, another great tag team with Damien,
Damien
I was going to say Mizdow.